In the bosom of a barbarous snowstorm on Highway 70, a tremendous birth buyer quietly counted her aftermost $47 with a lone 7 days left to accident everything. At her lowest moment, 15 weary Hell's Angels knocked, gluttonous shelter. Without hesitation, she opened the aperture and shared her final meal. By morning, the roar of hundreds of motorcycles filled the air al fresco her diner. Before we dive in, what time are you listening? Where are you from? Drop a animated version below and let me know. Sarah Williams stood behind the adverse of the Midnight Haven diner, staring at the assemblage of crumpled bills in her aspirous hands. $47. That was it. That was all that stood between her and the foreclosure notice tucked below the banknote register. The bank had accustomed her absolutely 7 days. 7 days afore aggregate she and Robert built was gone. The wind outside screamed like an affronted spirit, rattling the bottle and whistling through unseen cracks. The berth itself groaned under the storm's assault, as admitting the old building had developed as annoyed as its owner. Snow fell in heavy, affronted sheets, smothering the apple in white. Sarah glanced beyond the abandoned booths. The red vinyl seats were cracked, the laminate tabletop aching by years of truckers, travelers, and locals who once kept this abode alive. Now it was silent. Alike the coffee pot sputtered reluctantly, a apathetic gurgle filling the silence. It was about 8 p.m. She hadn't apparent a soul in hours. Her eyes drifted to booth number 4, Robert's booth. Alike 2 years afterwards Blight took him, she could still see him sitting there, his dark eyes twinkling, his easily captivated around a mug of atramentus coffee, his amusement soft and warm. They had bought this diner together 15 years ago with annihilation but her grandmother's bequest and their belief in one another. "We'll accomplish it work, baby," Robert acclimated to say. "This place will be a alarm on the mountain highway, a home abroad from home for anyone absent in the storm." Now the beacon flickered literally. The neon assurance al fresco bashed and stuttered, aggressive to go dark. The furnace coughed in protest, angry to keep the absinthian abundance algid at bay. Sarah captivated her cardigan tighter around her shoulders. Her fingers lingered on the foreclosure letter, mocking her in cold, bureaucratic language. The CB radio in the corner, once a buoy for truckers, barely hissed anymore. Years ago, that static carried life. Chatter about icy roads. Friendly choir calling her by name. Jokes exchanged beyond the airwaves. Now it was silent, aloof like the diner. She opened the annals again, counting slowly, foolishly, acquisitive the money might accept assorted aback the last time. It hadn't. $47. Not abundant for the electric bill, let alone the $12,000 in back payments the bank demanded. She had already awash her wedding ring. She had already sold Robert's tools. All she had larboard was this place, and it was bottom-ward away. Sarah sighed and glanced at the clock. 8:15, time to a butting up. She accomplished for the lights, accessible to abandonment aback, she heard it. A low rumble. At first, she thought it was a snow plow, but no, the sound was deeper, heavier. It pulsed like thunder. She apprenticed her face to the window. At first, annihilation but a wall of snow. Again, a side light emerged. 15 pairs of headlights acid through the storm. They grew louder, closer, until she saw them clearly. Motorcycles, big ones, Harley-Davidsons chewing through the storm in bound formation. Her pulse quickened. She had never apparent anything like it. The bikes swept into her parking lot, engines growling, headlights flashing adjoin the berth windows, leather-clad abstracts dismounted, silhouettes of ability and menace. The leader confused first, a alpine man, broad-shouldered, awkward hardly, as he walked against the diner. His bristles was frosted with ice, his covering jacket stiff with snow. His eyes, aback they met hers through the glass, were weary but steady. He aloft his hand, beating 3 times, respectful, patient. Sarah hesitated. Every aptitude told her to cast the lights off, lock the door, and pretend the berth was closed. These were Hell's Angels. She knew the patches. She'd apparent them in account reports whispered about in barter stop bathrooms. Dangerous men, the affectionate of men most people avoided. But again she noticed despite their alarming appearance, they stood agilely in the storm. They waited. They weren't demanding. They weren't blame their way in. They were simply exhausted, frozen, atrocious for shelter. Robert's articulation echoed in her memory. A blaze for travelers, baby. A home abroad from home. She apart the door. The storm shoved its way in. Blast of icy air crimper about her legs. The leader stepped forward, his bristles white with frost, tattoos arresting alike beneath the ice. Abaft him, the others followed, ample abstracts with scars, leather, and eyes accustomed by years of hard living, but anniversary of them paused at the aperture about shyly, as though unsure if they were welcome. "Ma'am," the baton said, his articulation grawly. "We've been benumbed for 12 hours. Highway shut bottomward 10 miles back. We aloof need somewhere to delay this storm out. We can pay. We won't account trouble." Her heart thundered, but her articulation came steady. "Come in, all of you." Relief swept across their faces as they filed in, stomping snow off boots, anxiously wiping the floor as if not to bedraggled her diner. For men with such alarming reputations, they moved with hasty care. One even held the aperture for the youngest, a boy who looked almost 22. The diner, empty for hours, now hummed with life. Leather jackets draped over chairs, beef rising as the men aqueous in the abrupt warmth. Sarah brewed coffee, cloud-bursted into thick mugs, her easily calm as the familiar ritual calmed her nerves. The men weren't aloof bikers. They were fathers, sons, veterans, brothers. Beneath the covering and tattoos, she saw the burnout of men who had endured much worse than this storm. She fed them everything she had. Canned soup, bread, scraps from the freezer. It wasn't much, but they ate with gratitude. The hours passed. Stories surfaced. Marcus, a broad man with tattoos like armor, told her about his son confined his third tour in Afghanistan. Addition remembered her kindness from years beforehand. Aback his bike had burst bottomward in a agnate storm. Then the youngest, Danny, batten up. His voice trembled as he accepted that 3 years ago she had adored him from the brink of despair. He had been accessible to end his life, but she had fed him, encouraged him, and handed him a business agenda that led him to a new start. Tears glistened in his eyes as he whispered, "You adored my life." One by one, they all accomplished this wasn't just a diner. It was a sanctuary. Sarah wasn't aloof, a woman aggravating to survive. She was the angel of Highway 70. By midnight, Jake, the leader, had stepped al fresco to accomplish calls. He spoken to his buzz for about an hour, pacing in the storm. Aback he returned. There was a tending in his eyes Sarah couldn't read. "Tomorrow morning," he said simply, "you'll see." And she did. By dawn, the rumble of motorcycles befuddled the mountains. Dozens, again hundreds, chrome and steel, glistened in the morning sun as bikers from every affiliate formed in. The parking lot abounding with Harleys, their engines glottal like thunder. Inside, Sarah's berth overflowed with men and women, bodies she had helped over the years. Abiding now to accord a debt. They handed her envelopes of cash, $68,000, enough to pay off the bank, clean the diner, and aggrandize it into a biker haven. Tears streaked Sarah's cheeks as she realized what Robert had consistently told her was true. Their berth had been a beacon, a blaze for travelers, and now the travelers had a pier aback to accumulate that light alive. 6 months later, Midnight Haven wasn't aloof a diner. It was a legend, featured in biker magazines, protected by every chapter, respected across the western states. And Sarah, she was still there abaft the counter, answering the CB radio the aforementioned way every night. The lights on, the coffee's hot, and the anchorage consistently accessible for family. Because Midnight Anchorage had become absolutely what Robert dreamed it would be.